What is Bleach FighterZ? It's a Bleach fighting game in the style of ArcSystemWorks. That is the easy and quick answer. But would it be a solo or a tag game? What game modes does it feature? What does the roster look like? After building a concept for Naruto and One Piece, it is time to dive into Bleach FighterZ. This video is brought to you by Raycon. Whether you're looking for a pair of everyday earbuds, low latency gaming headphones, or a speaker with a battery that will last all night at your next party, Raycon's got you covered. Ever since they sent me their everyday earbuds, my life's completely changed. My training to become a squad captain has significantly improved. I fall asleep with them every night and I take them with me every time I travel, because not only are they very easy to pack, but they come with this charging case that holds up to 32 hours of battery. The earbuds themselves have up to 8 hours of playtime that is actively listening to audio or making calls, so with the two of them together I can basically go for 40 hours without having to plug anything in. Plus, they are super easy to control as each earbud has a button, so switching tracks, pausing, turning the volume up or down is just a matter of tapping once or multiple times on the correct earbud. But more importantly, they sound great. But sound is something you have to experience for yourself, and that is why Raycon wants you to feel good about your purchase. They offer buy now, pay later options, and every single purchase has an easy and free return guarantee. So if you're ready to buy something small with a big impact, go to buyraycon.com/Globku to get 15% off your Raycon purchase. Buyraycon.com/Globku for 15%, and with all of these benefits, it's no wonder that Raycon's everyday earbuds have over 50,000 5-star reviews. Thank you, Raycon, for sponsoring this video. If Bleach FighterZ ever happens, it is definitely because of the 1000-year Blood War arc. There's a revamped popularity of Bleach, and honestly, it's well deserved because this might be the best arc the series has ever seen. And so, if we get a game, that will be the core theme. We'll have Ichigo and Yhwach on the cover. The roster will cover more of that arc than anything else, and even story mode could retell the events that happened during the show. The most important part of fighting games are the gameplay mechanics, so we're going to be dedicating a lot of time to its base systems and the roster as well. But I believe that single player and online game modes are often overlooked in fighting games, so to give you a general idea of what the whole game would look like, let's actually begin with game modes. We'll have the usual game modes that need no kind of explanation: versus, arcade, training, combo trials, and online. It's pretty obvious, but you gotta mention them, otherwise it always feels like it's missing something. But then we have story mode, which always needs an explanation. There are many different styles of story mode depending on the fighting game you're playing. A lot of them simply consist of CPU battles with some minor twists to the battle system and a cheap narrative weaved into it. Others are also just CPU battles, but they bet really hard on the story and cutscenes. And others change the rules of the game in a way that makes story mode feel unique, something you cannot simply replicate by picking the right characters in versus mode. With Bleach, I think we already have a very strong story with a 1000-year blood arc, so we could simply follow those events and give the gameplay some little twists. The final boss fight against Yhwach could be a buffed up version of himself. You know, he'd have the same moveset as he does in the fighting game, but maybe the moves come out faster and he breaks some of the general rules that the game has. Depending on the battle, you'd play in a 1v1 fight, in a 2v1, or a 2v2, depending on what the fight is. And although it sounds pretty simple, I think it would be already pretty good for a Bleach fighting game, provided the combat system itself is fun. So, let's talk about gameplay. This would be a 2D tag fighting game. Instead of 3v3 like Dragon Ball FighterZ, I think this is more of a 2v2 game for a couple of reasons. One, that's just the direction where tag games are headed. That's the trend the industry is following. I think we'll see a lot more 2v2 games in the future. And two, this game needs more installs than Dragon Ball FighterZ had, because a lot of characters change significantly once they activate their Bankai, or a Volstandig in the case of the Quincy. But a Bankai or Volstandig should be powerful when activated. So, what I would like to see is whenever a character activates this power-up, they have to play solo. Meaning, if they have an assist, that assist is now disabled for the whole duration of the Bankai or Volstandig. And it's such a powerful ability that it can only be used once per battle. You can think of it almost as a sparking blast. You can activate it early while you have both characters to try and gain the upper hand early in the fight, but the Bankai would be shorter if that's the case. But you can also activate it once you've already lost a character, and your character is now playing solo, you activate Bankai, it lasts for a longer period of time. And since it is so powerful, it already acts as its own comeback mechanic, so this would be completely replacing Sparking Blast. Not everyone will have an awakening ability like this though, and for the characters that don't have it, another mechanic would replace it, which we can call the Soul Link. Once you activate a Soul Link, the Soul Link will reduce your assist cooldown greatly, so you can just kinda spam assists if you have them. If you don't, that means you're the last character remaining, and the Soul Link will just give you a quick burst of healing. This would make you think about your team composition. Do you want to take a Bankai into the battlefield, or is that health burst something a lot more valuable to to you. All while taking into account how each character plays, their character synergy. I think this would make for some very fun and creative teams. The rest of the mechanics would be pretty close to Dragon Ball FighterZ, the same button layout, auto combos. We have to remove the super dash, as that is very much a Dragon Ball thing. Instead, I would like to see replaced with Shumpo or flash steps, as a way to pay homage to Bleach Dark Souls, which had a really cool system called Shumpo canceling. You can basically cancel any move with a flash step, and that's how you extend most combos, something that Project Gote, the Bleach fan game, is also doing. But in order to not be so broken like it is in the fan game, an official game would have to be a bit more moderate, so it needs some sort of limit, maybe only one Shumpo per combo. But I think you should also be able to use Shumpo in neutral, for instance, as a defensive mechanic. It would work almost like the roll in Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. You can just slide past the character, but instead of having a rolling animation, your character just kind of vanishes. With that said, let's get to the most exciting part of the video and build that roster. For this roster, we're gonna have 24 characters. I always find the limitation both frustrating, but also necessary. Fighting games don't come out with infinite rosters. We can't have everyone that we want in there, and having to make choices on who to cut is always interesting to me. And this time, I'll also show you the playstyle for each character. I'm gonna go through the entire roster and keep an eye on the gameplay playing on the background, as I've gone through many different fighting games to find the movesets to fit each one of these Bleach characters. They're not always one-to-one, but they should at least give you a vibe of what I'm going for. And of course, this is the 1000-year Blood War arc, which means I have to be very careful with spoilers here. I've spent the last week reading this arc in the manga so I could bring you the final roster that is actually required to tell the story. And while being completely spoiler-free is impossible, I'm gonna do my best with a couple of spoiler rules. Number one, I will show you all the characters that deserve a spot on the roster, but I will not be explaining why. This is just so I don't get into story specifics. That said, if you see a character in the roster, it's probably because they did something significant. Not being a part of the roster doesn't mean they didn't do something significant though. Sometimes it means I don't think they would make for a fun fighting game character, or their archetype already exists, so it's a waste of a slot. So it's gonna be very, very light on spoilers. And rule number two, some forms or powers could be spoiled while I'm talking about movesets, but I will not spoil anything that hasn't been spoiled already by Jump Force. I mean, at this point, we've all seen Ichigo's Bankai, but I won't go any further than Jump Force already did when it comes to spoiling stuff. If you're okay with these rules, let's get started. First up, the pillars of this roster, Ichigo and Yuhabaha, main character and main villain. The new Ichigo is a dual blade wielder, but he still fights with one blade for most of the time, pulling the second blade only to do some special attacks and whatnot. I would actually not make him an installed character. Bankai would still be present, but only as an ultimate attack, just like Jump Force. He'd be a Shoto character with Getsuga Tensho acting as a projectile, a DP, and all that beginner-friendly stuff that a main character should definitely have. Yuhabaha is boss character material. His moveset would break a lot of the rules of the game because he's a character that breaks the rules of the show. Every swing has to demonstrate power. Next, every Bleach game has to have Orihime, Chad, and Ishida. It's almost mandatory. Orihime would fight with projectiles and would be the only character that can heal without using a soul link. Chad would be a stance character, alternating between his defensive right arm and his offensive left arm with the press of a button. And Ishida would be a bow character, mostly a zoner that would also utilize a bunch of Quincy techniques. Also mandatory are Ichigo's Shinigami friends, Rukia and Nenji. And this is where we see the first installs of the roster. Rukia would have a freeze gimmick on her special moves, and her Bankai completely transforms the character, as we've seen in Jump Force. And the same goes for Renji, who goes from being a mid-range fighter, thanks to how long his weapon is, to being a close-range monster when he activates the Bankai. And of course, it wouldn't be Bleach without our favorite captains, Byakuya, Kenpachi, Hitsugaya, Mayuri, and Kyoraku. Someone's favorite character will always be left out of this list. There's no space for everyone. These are the ones that I consider essential to the story, but more could come as DLC. DLC is very easy to do for this game. Byakuya would fight from melee range, but then activate Senbon Sakura, which would be on a separate meter just like Zato in Guilty Gear Strive. And his Bankai wouldn't really be an install, but a buff to the current moves. He would have infinite Senbon Sakura meter, and those Senbon Sakura attacks could be bigger and better. Kenpachi could probably have an install, but I don't want to talk about it because of spoilers, so let's just have him be a powerhouse. Capable of armoring through a lot of moves, not invincible, just powering through the pain. Hitsugaya definitely needs an install. In fact, I think he would fight in his Bankai form from the very start. He would be that character in the roster that is able of free flight, and his install would be the complete Bankai form where he becomes older. It's actually impressive how much Jump Force spoiled down. Mayuri is that type of unpredictable character. He will counter anything the opponent does with the power of science, and since that's impossible to do in a fighting game, I think he would have a poison gimmick where his attacks can make the opponent's health deplete over time. And finally, Kyoraku is a dual wielder, but also a very playful character. He's mandatory for this game since he's the new captor of the Gote 13. He's gonna play a major role in this arc. And for a while, I wondered if I should include this next character or not, Yamamoto, because you've actually seen the last of him in this show. go. But I also think his fight was probably the most important thing that happened in this first act of the 1000-Year Blood War arc. He would fight with a lot of flames by default, but then activate the Bankai and all the flames would suddenly be gone, but somehow he's stronger than before. We know how his Bankai works at this point. That's basically the idea. And to wrap up the Soul Reapers on this side of the screen, we have Ichibe. He's the only member of Squad Zero that we're gonna add, but is definitely mandatory as the leader. He has a very unique fighting style that I think you guys will enjoy if you haven't read it yet, and that's all I'll say about it. The game also needs some bad guys. Most of them would be Quincy, and these are the ones that I would add: Asphalt, Askin, Lille, Gerard, and Bazby. Asphalt is your typical knight. He looks like the protagonist of some medieval anime. I can definitely see a lot of Kai Kisuke in his fighting style, but he's got a weird power, so I don't think he would be a straightforward Shoto. Askin would be a setup character, placing traps with different types of effects and waiting or luring opponents into stepping on them. Lille would be your sniper character. He would just be the biggest zoner of the game, even more so than Ishida or Orihime. He really just wants to be shooting you from full screen. Gerard would be a sword and shield character with powerful sword swings, but also the ability to block with a shield, perhaps denying any sort of high-low mix-ups with a motion input. Bazby would be an actual Shoto with a mix of close and long-range abilities and explosive fast fireballs. And of course, Aizen is also getting added to the game. He's a massive presence in this universe, and he would also be a total boss character, the type that doesn't have to move an inch to deliver extreme pain. We're almost done with the roster. There are only two more characters that I'd consider essential to telling the story of this arc, and those are Urahara and Yoruichi. And I actually don't have an ideal moveset for Urahara, so I'll leave this one up to you guys. He's very unpredictable, so he ends up being the joke character in a lot of Bleach games, so the one thing I would like is to see a serious Urahara for once. And then Yoruichi is a close-range rushdown character, very mix-up heavy, using your fast movement to cross you up before you can even react. And as you can see, we still have two more slots for characters, and we could have anything in there. So first, I'm gonna add another Quincy, since I think we need to have some more bad guys, and I really like the power of As Not. To instill fear on anyone that is hit by his projectiles, I think we could have a mechanic where if he hits an opponent with a special move, he can then have a second activation of that special move, paralyzing that opponent for a very short time. And the final character would be Grimjaw, because he's a fan favorite and a nice way to represent the Hueco Mundo arc. Who am I kidding? Jump Force also spoiled that. And that's the roster for Bleach FighterZ. Of course, we also need stages to fight in. 3 of those stages would probably be Soul Society, since a lot of this war takes place there. One stage could be the Vandenreich, which is the Quincy base that has a very distinct look. This is not exactly where I would have the stage. Manga readers know what I'm talking about. 2 of the stages would take place in the Soul King Palace, one at the base level, and the other one I can't show you because it's too much of a spoiler, but it's inside that place. It's the Greater Soul King Palace. And then the final 2 stages would be Karakura Town and Hueco Mundo. 2 very distinct stages visually to give the game some more variety. And just like that, we have built Bleach FighterZ. This game seems like an absolute dream come true, just like these earbuds. Go to buyraycon.com/Globku for 15% off anything you buy. The link is down below. And if you'd like to see something other than a fighting game for Bleach, check out the Dream Bleach game right here. Thank you for watching. Bye.